The night I stepped out, I knew I was tempting fate, but the pull was too strong to resist. That relentless yearning to be out in the world as a girl, even if just for a little while, finally drowned out the fear that had kept me locked away for so long. The moment I crossed the threshold, a wave of liberation washed over me. The stars above twinkled indifferently, the warm night air whispered against my skin, and the moon bathed everything in silver, but none of it compared to the intoxicating sensation of fresh air gliding over my newly shaved legs. My hair danced in the breeze, my skirt swayed with each step, and the weight of my breast forms tugged ever so gently at my blouse. The rhythmic sound of my heels against the patio floor, the faint scent of makeup lingering in the air, the taste of lipstick on my lips, it was pure bliss, an intoxicating spell I never wanted to break. For an hour, I reveled in the fantasy, until reality forced me back inside. I stripped away my transformation, scrubbing away every trace of who I had been, locking my secret wardrobe back into its hidden trunk. Staring into the mirror, I loathed what I saw. 15 years of being a boy could never compare to a single fleeting hour of being a girl. My heart ached with the longing to live as her more often, but fear still had its claws in me. Life went on as it always had, until, just before my birthday, an envelope arrived, an invitation. The Maiden's Ball, the annual tradition hosted by the city's Parks and Recreation Department. It was a competition, a spectacle. Boys between 12 and 18 transformed into maidens for a week, culminating in the grand event. I had never dared to participate, afraid someone would notice how much I enjoyed it. And yet, others had done it. At school alone, at least 10 guys had gone through with it, 3 of them dressing up even before the official start, some continuing for days after. I stared at the invitation, denial rising like a tide. My fingers clenched, ready to toss it in the trash until the front door swung open, and my mother stepped inside, sealing my fate with a single sentence. "Oh good, you got the invitation. When I'm done with you, you'll be the prettiest girl at the ball this year." I blinked. Me. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Dress as a girl? "Of course," she said, her smile unwavering. "We both know you've been playing dress up for a long time, so it's about time we brought that girl you've been hiding out into the open. Now, I know you want to deny it, but I've already made up my mind. Starting Monday, you'll be a girl for the week. That means we have tonight and the entire weekend to get you ready, plenty of time to build you a proper wardrobe. Now, wait here while I grab my measuring tape." My thoughts tumbled over one another. She knew. Even after all my careful efforts to hide it, she knew. And not only did she know, but she was determined to make sure I had enough clothes, makeup, and shoes to last me far beyond just this week. I wanted to resist, to put my foot down and refuse, but I couldn't. She had already decided. And perhaps deep down so had I. Mom was all business, swiftly scribbling down a list of essentials before ushering me into the car. There was no room for hesitation, she had decided, and that was that. We were going shopping for a wardrobe befitting a proper maiden. I followed her through the stores in silent awe, watching as she confidently selected items I had only ever dreamed of owning. A delicate nightgown, real bras that actually fit, a mysterious padded panty brief, pantyhose, skirts, blouses, and 2 dresses, all things I had longed for but never dared to buy. In a budget-friendly shoe store, she had me try on a pair of flats, followed by my first ever heels. It felt surreal, the way she moved through it all as if this were the most natural thing in the world. By the time we headed home, the back seat was piled high with shopping bags, my future, wrapped in tissue paper and plastic. Mom barely spoke, only mentioning that she had a few things planned for me once we got home, and that the real transformation would begin in the morning. As I carried the packages into my room, she handed me a bottle of hair remover, her instructions as direct as ever. "Use this everywhere you can reach. Then shave the rest," she said. "I want you as smooth as possible." I didn't need to be told twice. The moment my door clicked shut, I stripped down and got to work, watching as the last remnants of my old self washed away down the drain. That night, for the first time, I slipped into a nightgown, its silky fabric whispering against my freshly bare skin. I lay awake, visions tumbling through my mind. What would I look like when Mom was done with me? What would it feel like to step into the world as a girl, not in secret, but with my mother's full approval? The anticipation was electric. The next morning, I emerged for breakfast, still in my nightgown, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Mom didn't bat an eye, merely instructing me to help with the dishes before we began what she grandly called a transformation into a fetching beauty unmatched by any before. Back in my room, I faced the inevitable moment of burying myself before my mother for the first time since childhood. She waited, unmoving, patient. Swallowing hard, I finally slipped off the nightgown and stepped into the panties she handed me. There was no awkwardness on her part, only quiet determination. Within an hour, the reflection staring back at me was no longer the boy I had always seen, but the girl I had always known existed inside. She led me to her bedroom, seating me at her vanity with the effortless grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "Start with foundation," she instructed, watching as I carefully blended it across my face. Powder followed, then a light blue eyeshadow, softened with a hint of plum. She lined my upper lids in brown and traced beneath my eyes with a soft blue pencil, finishing with black mascara that lengthened my lashes in a way that made my eyes look larger, brighter. As she set a few rollers in my hair, I wondered if this was how all girls felt if transformation was simply part of their everyday magic. Back in my room, it was time to dress. The bra came first, and as Mom reached for a pair of nylons to stuff it, I stopped her, pulling out my own homemade breast forms, birdseed-filled and well-worn. She only smiled, nodding in approval. Next came the pantyhose, followed by the padded panty brief that sculpted my hips into a subtle curve. Then the skirt, a tan and white plaid pleated just above my knees, and a short-sleeved tan blouse that fit me perfectly. Mom handed me a pair of brown flats, and we returned to her room for the finishing touches. She worked with quiet focus, placing 2 small clip-on bows in my hair, allowing my bangs to soften my forehead, while the sides framed my face just right. Then came the lipstick, a pale plum shade that complemented the makeup perfectly, followed by brown and white earrings. When she finally stepped back, letting me take in my reflection, my breath caught. I looked real. Not like a boy in girl's clothes, not like someone playing dress-up, but like the girl I had always imagined. Mom took my hand, guiding me into the family room. "Well, what do you think, honey? Is this better than what you do by yourself?" I swallowed, my voice unsteady. Yeah, I guess." She smiled, satisfied. "Okay then, what should we call you? Every maiden needs a proper name. Have you decided on one?" I hesitated, heart pounding, before finally saying, "Well, I was thinking, maybe Gwen." "Oh, that's a lovely name," Mom said with a warm smile. "Feminine, but not too flashy, I like it." Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Now, what do you think about doing a little shopping after we get you registered for the ball? You'll need more than just skirts, especially since you'll be dressing as a girl from now until after the event. And of course, you'll need a proper ball gown. If you win, you'll have to make a few public appearances throughout the year, so we should make sure we get the right size and the perfect color for you." I wanted to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, Mom simply handed me a small tan purse. "Put your things in here," she instructed before heading off to get herself ready. Within 20 minutes, we were in the car, heading toward the registration office. As we pulled up, I spotted 2 others like me boys unmistakably dressed as girls walking into the building. That should have reassured me, but my nerves still buzzed beneath the surface. Inside, I was officially registered under my new name, Gwen. Everything else remained the same: age, address, details unchanged. Then came an unexpected step: a nurse's verification. Apparently, in the past, a couple of actual girls had tried to sneak in, so now they made sure every applicant was, in fact, a boy. The process was brief, just a formality, but it still sent a strange shiver through me. Mom had planned for a shopping trip right after, but the day had slipped away faster than expected, and with dinner time approaching, we decided to head home instead. She promised we'd go first thing in the morning. Unlike in the mall, where I knew people might stare, the registration office was used to boys in dresses. No one gave me a second glance. That should have reassured me, but I knew tomorrow would be different. The mall was another world entirely. That night, alone in my bedroom, I pulled out everything Mom had bought and tried it all on. Just wearing a bra that actually fit was a revelation. With my homemade breast forms in the cups, I almost looked natural. The A cup fit far better than the old B cup I had borrowed from Mom, making me look less exaggerated and more like a real girl. Everything else fit perfectly too. Slipping into bed in my nightgown, I felt a rush of excitement, though sleep was hard to come by. Morning brought breakfast, and what was quickly becoming my new daily ritual. Once again, Mom helped transform me into Gwen. This time, I wore the same skirt, but paired it with a white top and the tan flats. At the mall, I followed in silence as Mom rattled off a list of absolute necessities, along with a few items she vaguely labeled as things you might want for later. I knew what that meant: clothes for when the pageant was over, for the moments when I would still want to dress up, but would have to do so in secret again. A strange contradiction settled deep within me. The heavy weight that had always pressed down on my heart, the one that whispered that being a boy wasn't so bad, that I could endure it, had momentarily lifted. For the first time, I was allowed to be who I was every single day, and that realization filled me with a quiet kind of joy. But with it came another, more unsettling thought: what happens when it ends? Would I look so convincingly like a girl that no one would believe I was ever a boy? Or, worse, would people see right through me and mock me for what I was? Either way, this experience was pulling me further down a path I knew I couldn't easily turn back from. And lurking just beyond all the excitement, I could still feel a familiar bleakness, waiting in the shadows, whispering that soon enough, I would have to go back to being a boy. Each moment at the mall pulled me deeper into the world I had always longed for. With every item Mom handed me, every question she asked about my preferences, I felt more like a girl. By the time we paused for lunch, I had completely forgotten that I wasn't one. I sat across from her, smiling, effortlessly discussing what the other girls at school wore, trying to nudge her into letting me pick out the styles I liked. The tide of femininity had swept me up, and I had no desire to fight against it. I picked out a push-em-up bra, though Mom balanced the selection with 2 plain white ones. I longed for satin, nylon, or silk panties, but she settled on practical cotton. I angled for short skirts, but had to settle for ones that barely skimmed above my knees. I wanted low-cut tops, yet she shot that down immediately. Girls your age don't wear things like that. I lost that battle too. But I did win some victories. A padded panty brief and a waist nipper gave me a more feminine shape, and Mom even bought a pair of breast forms, not the makeshift birdseed kind I had used, but real ones. The moment she handed them to me, I wore them, delighting in how natural they felt. We found cosmetics that better suited my complexion, and then, without warning, Mom led me straight to a jewelry counter and had my ears pierced. She had gone all out, far beyond what was necessary for a simple pageant. I found myself wondering why now. Mom had never brought up my dressing before, and I had been so certain that she didn't know. But she had always been aware of the maiden's ball, so why had she waited until now? Why not sooner? The question gnawed at me, but I didn't dare ask. I was too thrilled to have clothes that were mine, clothes that actually fit and weren't borrowed from her. Clothes I could wear openly, without fear. Then, just as I was basking in my happiness, she said something that sent a chill through me. "Now that you have the right clothing," Mom said, her voice firm, "I don't want to hear about you sneaking around at night like some kind of common whore. Am I making myself clear?" My stomach turned to ice. "You were never as careful as you thought," she continued. "Mrs. Carson saw you. Several times, she told me, walking around late at night, always dressed as a girl. Now, you can come and go as you please, but from now on, when you do, you'll be dressed properly as a girl. But somehow, I don't think that bothers you very much, does it?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off before I could find the words. "Never mind, I already know the answer. What I don't know is, can you give it up when the pageant is over?" The question hit me like a blow. My arms went slack, and I plopped down on a nearby bench, setting my shopping bags on the floor. Mom sat beside me, waiting, giving me the space to answer honestly. I wanted to spill everything, to tell her how I felt my whole life, how this wasn't a game for me, how the idea of returning to being just a boy filled me with dread. But the right words wouldn't come. I struggled, desperate not to sound weak. Only one word made it past my lips. No. Instant shame burned through me. Mom, however, didn't look surprised. If anything, she seemed satisfied. If that's the case, she said, standing up with a decisive nod, then maybe we should do all we can to make it possible for you to keep dressing as a girl. Come with me, young lady, you're about to get your wish. I blinked up at her. What does that mean? It means, she said, that you and I are going to the beauty shop. I'm going to have your hair styled and set in a way that suits you. That way, you won't have to fuss with it as much. And maybe, if they think you need it, I'll let them thin out your eyebrows a little. My eyes widened. A perm? You want me to get a perm? Not a hard set, honey, she reassured me, but enough to make it easy for you to manage. Why? What's the problem? It's so permanent. Panic clawed at my throat. I'd have to shave my head to get rid of it. Mom tilted her head, watching me closely. But you just told me you want to be a girl. Did you change your mind? I swallowed hard. No. But then we'll do this my way unless, of course, you're willing to quit. The way she said it made my stomach drop. I knew what she was doing. She was pushing me to admit what I wanted, forcing me to own it. I clenched my fists in my lap. No, Mom, but a perm. She smiled. Exactly. Mom said yes. I told myself I was only going along with it because it was her idea, that if anyone asked, I could shrug and say, what could I do? My mom insisted, and if my hair ended up looking too much like a girl's, well, wasn't it easier just to dress to match it? I clung to that little lie, hoping it would make me feel like I still had control. But deep down, I knew the truth. Stepping into the beauty shop felt like walking into a dream I had carried for as long as I could remember. The scent of shampoo, the hum of hairdryers, the gentle chatter of women swathed in pastel smocks, pink, green, blue, admiring their reflections or waiting patiently as stylists worked their magic. And now here I was among them. Mom spoke to the woman at the counter. Then an older stylist guided me to a chair. First time, honey, she asked, her voice warm. I nodded. She patted my shoulder. Your mother told me to make you beautiful, so how about we get started? I held my breath as she washed my hair, trimmed it just enough to shape it, then dyed it. Auburn. When the rich color had set, she rinsed it out and rolled my damp locks into curlers. The moment the warm air of the dryer enveloped me, another woman took my hands and started shaping my nails, rounding them just slightly before painting them a soft plum. And just when I thought I could sit back and enjoy this transformation, the waxing began. A younger girl approached, holding a wooden paddle coated in yellowish gunk. She spread it across my arms, smoothing it down before I had time to wonder what it was. It's wax, she said cheerfully. I still didn't understand. Then, before I could ask, she ripped it off. I nearly rocketed out of my chair. When my vision cleared and my soul returned to my body, she rubbed in a lotion that soothed the sting. My fingers skimmed over my skin. It was silky smooth. No fuzz, no roughness, nothing but the barest, softest touch. She continued down to my legs, repeating the process. By the time she reached my eyebrows, I no longer had the energy to protest. I just clenched my teeth and let her pluck and shape them into delicate, feminine arches. 2 hours later, I was allowed to stand. The girl in the mirror, the one staring back at me, was exactly who I had always known I was. Smooth, radiant skin, wavy auburn hair brushing just past my shoulders, bringing out the blue in my eyes. Everything about me looked right, like I had stepped into the body I was always supposed to have. If there had been even a fleeting thought about backing out, it was gone, discarded like the hair that had been stripped from my skin. I was a girl, and I loved how I looked. Mom beamed at me, saying I was gorgeous. But she was my mom, of course she'd say that. Still, I could see in her eyes that she meant it. By the time we got home, I was practically buzzing from the day's events. As I unpacked my new wardrobe, I pulled out a skirt and top, already planning how I'd handle anyone who dared to give me trouble. As I lifted my new breast forms from the box, a small jar of adhesive tumbled out beside them. My heart skipped. I changed into my skirt, then called for Mom. "Can you help me attach these?" She nodded without hesitation, helping me apply the adhesive before pressing the forms against my chest. The bond was firm, secure, and as I pulled on my bra, I felt it the weight. A soft, natural pull that made my chest feel real. I stood there, adjusting the straps, and grinned. It was me. Not a disguise, not a costume, just me. I slipped my top over my head, touched up my lipstick, dabbed a little perfume onto my wrists, and with a final look in the mirror, I headed for the front door. "Going somewhere, Gwen?" Mum's voice stopped me just as I reached for the handle. I turned to her, smirking. "Mrs. Carson's. Since she's been watching me all this time, I figured I'd let her see me in daylight." Mom crossed her arms and pushed her face in it too. "That is no way for a young lady to act, and certainly not my daughter. If you want to show her, we'll do it properly. I'll call and invite her over for lunch tomorrow. Then you can show her how you look." I hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow, then. Let Mrs. Carson see me exactly as I was." Mrs. Carson arrived for lunch as promised, but when I stepped out to greet her, her reaction was worth every second of preparation I put into my appearance. Her eyes widened not with recognition, but with disbelief. She wasn't looking at a boy in a dress. She was looking at a girl. With my breast form secured, the waist nipper shaping my midsection, and the padded panty brief subtly enhancing my hips, I had a silhouette that fit perfectly for a girl my age. My makeup was flawlessly applied, my nails painted to match, and my auburn hair framed my face just right. There wasn't a single trace of the boy I used to be. Mom, ever composed, introduced me without hesitation. "Mrs. Carson, this is my daughter, Gwen." And just like that, whatever words Mrs. Carson might have had for me was swallowed back down. By the time she left, Mom and I were smiling at each other, knowing we had both won this silent battle. That night, as I laid out my clothes for the next day, a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervous energy ran through me. Tomorrow would be my first day at school as a girl. I woke early, excitement trumping any lingering fear. First, I did my makeup with practiced care, perfecting each stroke until I was satisfied. I dressed with precision, no waist nipper today, but I kept the padded panty brief and pantyhose. A short, pleated grey skirt, a simple white blouse, and my black flats completed the look. Mom helped me with my hair, and once I had dabbed on some perfume and touched up my lipstick, I grabbed my books and purse and stepped outside, stepping into my new life. At the corner, I spotted familiar faces, kids I had known for years, but none of them recognized me, and that suited me just fine. But the illusion didn't last long. As soon as I took my usual seat in my first class, my secret unraveled. There were a few other guys participating in the maiden's ball, but they still looked like guys. No amount of makeup or dresses could change that. I, on the other hand, had crossed some invisible line. The girls sat in stunned silence, and the guys, well, they just stared. It wasn't until lunchtime that things really shifted. I had just taken a seat when I was suddenly joined by three of the most popular girls in school. Valerie, the leader of the trio, leaned in with a knowing smirk. "Hi, Gwen," she said smoothly. "So listen, we were talking, and you might not think so, but you look really good. So good, in fact, that we were wondering if you're really a guy at all." I nearly choked on my sandwich. "What?" "Seriously," she laughed. "You could be some long-lost cousin posing as a boy pretending to be a girl, and we'd never know. And considering how the guys are looking at you, we think we deserve an answer." I swallowed hard, feeling my face heat up. "Valerie, you've known me since we started school. You know, I'm not a real girl. I can't help the way I turned out, and besides, I'm not interested in guys." Valerie held up her hands in surrender, laughing. "Relax, Don't get your panties in a twist, Gwen. We had to ask. But look, you can say you're not interested in guys all you want, but with the way you look, they're gonna be all over you within a week. You might as well just go with the flow and enjoy it. I blinked. Huh? Valerie rolled her eyes, as if explaining something obvious. The guys pay when you go on a date, silly. And who says you have to do anything except be polite? If one of those hunks asks you out, just try it. You might like it. I sat there, stunned, as her words sank in. And then I noticed it. The guys. The way their eyes lingered on me for just a little too long. The way some of them glanced away quickly when I caught them staring. Valerie was right. Some of them weren't just looking at me. They were attracted to me. A strange warmth spread through me at the realization. It felt good, validating, but also terrifying. If I accepted a date, what would people say? What would he say? And more importantly, what would that make me? By the end of the day, my nerves had settled, and a quiet confidence took their place. No one was harassing me. No one was calling me out. In fact, I wasn't just passing, I was blending in. The next day was more of the same, and by then, I knew I wasn't going to be teased or bullied for the way I looked. Instead, I was admired. Not everyone made it that far. By the third day, 2 of the other guys who had dressed up had given up. They returned as themselves, telling me that standing next to me and Kathy, the only other one who was really trying, made them feel like potatoes in a field of roses. Kathy did make an effort, but she still moved like a boy, still carried herself like one. She never quite let herself become the role. We rarely spoke, because deep down, I think we both knew I wasn't playing a role anymore. As the days passed, I became more skilled at doing my own hair and makeup, whittling my morning routine down to a neat 45 minutes. I even started experimenting with my small wardrobe, mixing and matching pieces to create new looks. Mom, in turn, began treating me exactly like she would if I were truly her daughter. At first, that annoyed me, but when she reminded me that only a handful of people knew the truth, I understood. If I wanted to stay safe, I had to start thinking like a girl, not just looking like one. It made sense, and I let go of my frustration. On Friday, I decided to push things a little, wearing low-rise jeans that sat on my hips and a navel-bearing top. I never expected the reaction I got, but it wasn't from a classmate. It was from a teacher. Right in front of the entire class, she turned to me and said, "Young lady, that is inappropriate dress in this class. You'll go change right now, or I will have no choice but to send you to the office." Young lady? My heart nearly stopped. She knew I was a boy, or at least I thought she did. Panicked, I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could get a word out, Valerie discreetly slipped me a key under the desk. "I've got a sweater in my locker," she whispered. "Use it." Grateful, I took the key and slipped out of the room. I found her locker, pulled out the sweater, and threw it on over my head. When I walked back into class, the teacher smiled and let me take my seat without a second glance. That's when it hit me. Nobody in class had laughed. Nobody had snickered, whispered, or nudged their neighbor. They had all accepted it, accepted me as a girl. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. The relief was so profound, I actually smiled to myself. And then at lunch, something happened that shook me even more. I had just sat down and waved to Valerie and Amelia across the cafeteria. They started toward me, but then abruptly stopped when Norman slid into the seat beside me. "Hi," he said, casually. "Mind if I sit here with you?" No, of course not. I tried to mask my shock with a polite smile. "So, listen, Gwen." He hesitated for a second, then leaned in slightly. "I was wondering if you'd like to go to the show with me." My brain completely short-circuited. "Norm, you know who I am, right?" I asked carefully. "Yeah, so?" "And you still want to take me to a show?" "Sure, why not?" He shrugged. "Everyone's been watching you, and the general thought is that even when this pageant is over, you'll still be here. And if that's the case," he paused, meeting my gaze, "then I want to take you out." I stared at him, utterly speechless. Then he reached across the table and placed his hand gently over mine, offering me a small, reassuring smile. Something inside me softened, and before I could overthink it, I found myself nodding. Okay. His face lit up. Great. I'll pick you up at 7 on Saturday. He pulled out his phone. What's your number and address? I gave them to him, still floating somewhere between disbelief and exhilaration. After lunch, he walked me to class. Talk about being on cloud 9. Of course, Valerie, Amelia, and the others pounced on me as soon as they had the chance. So what happened at lunch? Valerie demanded, eyes practically burning with curiosity. I tried to downplay it, acting like it was no big deal. Oh, Norm just asked me to the show. That's it. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Guys, we've been friends forever, I reminded them. He's just being nice. I saw Amelia exchange a look with Zoe and Valerie, something unreadable, almost knowing. Then she shook her head with a small, amused smile. I had a feeling I was missing something. Guys don't ask us out just to be kind, Gwen. Valerie rolled her eyes, exasperated. They're attracted to us, which is why they ask. That, and the fact that they want to get into our panties, of course, she added with a smirk. But we never let that happen. We let them think so, but we don't go there. Norm likes you. Can't you see it? He's been mooning over you since the first second you walked into school. Mooning? I repeated, blinking in disbelief. Over me, but everyone knows who I am. They all know this is for the maiden's pageant, which means they all know that I'm not really a girl. Valerie gave me a look, that mix of amusement and exasperation only a best friend can give. Yeah, we all know that, hon, but you don't look the least little bit like a boy. When you walked in today with your navel showing, the first thing I thought was wow, and trust me, everyone else thought the same thing. Looking the way you do, none of us can picture you going back to being a boy when the pageant's over. So you might as well get used to the idea that guys are attracted to you because, well, you're hot. That last part knocked the wind out of me. That's what Norm said, I murmured. Is it true? That nobody expects me to go back to being a boy. As one, they all nodded. I felt something shift inside me. Could I do it? Stay, Gwen. Live as a girl for real. That night, as I set the table and started dinner, I kept turning the question over and over in my head. When Mom got home, I told her about Norm asking me out then about what the girls had said. We both knew this was up to her. She sat in silence, just looking at me, and with each passing second, I felt my nerves creeping up my spine. Finally, she spoke. I suppose they're right, Gwen. I can't see you quitting either. But the school system will have to go along with it. You do have 2 more years of high school. I blinked. My heart started pounding. Does that mean you'll let me be Gwen from now on? I knew I sounded incredulous, but that's exactly how I felt. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Mom slumped in her chair, resting her chin on her folded hands. No matter what I do, it'll be wrong somehow, she said softly. But I have a feeling that even if I told you no, you find a way to keep dressing as a girl anyway. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, waiting, holding my breath. I had the same thought when we first bought you those clothes, she continued. Watching you eagerly try them on, picking out what you liked, you acted like any teenage girl I've ever met. But I thought it would just be a once-in-a-while thing. Then, when we went to the beauty shop, I thought, if you had even flinched, if you had protested even a little, I wouldn't have let them do so much to you. But you didn't. You went for it, all in, and you enjoyed every second of it. I swallowed hard. And now every morning I watch you get ready, and you just keep getting better. More graceful, more natural. Every day, my son disappears a little more, and in his place, I see this beautiful, confident young woman. She shook her head. When I saw what you wore to school today, it hit me just how much of a girl you've become. And since there's probably nothing I could do to stop you, I don't really have much of a choice, do I? The words came out of me before I even thought about them. I'll quit right now if you tell me to, Mom. She smiled gently. Thank you, dear. But we both know you can't quit, can you? I hesitated. I could try. Mom reached out and took my hand, squeezing it. And you would fail, Gwen. Mom straightened up, her expression shifting into something more curious, almost playful. She asked all about Norm, who he was, how we became friends, and what I thought about him. Then, to my surprise, she gave her permission for me to go on my first date. After dinner, I helped with the dishes before retreating to my room to do my homework. Without thinking twice, I signed my assignments as Gwen. A thought struck me: if I needed the school system to accept me as a girl, having all my work turned in under my real name would be a subtle but powerful piece of evidence. I wasn't sure where the idea had come from, but it felt right, so I committed to it. From that moment on, Gwen was the only name I wrote. I never brought up my date again, but the 2 days of waiting stretched endlessly before me. By Saturday morning, anticipation had twisted itself into full-blown nerves. After breakfast, I picked out my outfit 3 different times. Mom found my indecision amusing, but let me suffer through it. By the afternoon, I had a plan. I took a long, luxurious bubble bath, something I had only recently discovered and loved, then carefully shaved away every last bit of unwanted hair. There was no way I was going to be anything less than perfect. Getting dressed was a process. I wore my best bra, paired with a pleated green and blue skirt and pantyhose. My makeup was the best I had ever done, but I still fussed over it, and my hair. That took hours. Finally, Mom came into my room, sat me down, and gently took over. "You're nervous," she said, smoothing my hair with practiced hands. I nodded. She worked in silence for a few moments before slipping something into my hand. A small gold ring. "This was mine," she said softly. "I wore it in high school. Your father gave it to me." I turned it over in my fingers. A narrow gold band with a small opal set in the top. "I think it's time I gave it to you," she continued. "Your father and I always said it would go to our oldest daughter. And that's you." Tears pricked my eyes as I slipped the ring onto my finger. I turned and hugged her tightly. "Just be a good girl tonight, Gwen." Trying to lighten the mood, I grinned. "How could I be anything but a good girl, Mom?" She smirked knowingly. "Oh, there are plenty of ways a girl can make a man happy, but I don't think you're old enough to find out what they are. Just be polite. Be the girl you really are." "Thanks, Mom." I hugged her again, then went back to my room, waiting for Norm to arrive. When the doorbell rang, Norm and his father stood outside. Introductions were made, and then we left, his dad dropping us off at the theater. That's when I noticed the little things. The aftershave he was wearing, it smelled good, really good. I had never paid attention to something like that before. He was also taller than me by a full head. During the movie, he casually draped his arm around my shoulders. I let myself lean into him, enjoying the warmth of his presence. Then, in the dim glow of the screen, during a particularly dark scene, he leaned over and gently pressed his lips against mine. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't pull away. It felt nice. Very, very nice. Later, when we reached my front door, he kissed me again, this time, a little firmer, a little more deliberate. And again, I melted into it. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, my heart racing. There was no way I could ever go back to being a boy. I lay in bed that night, replaying every moment of my first date, too excited to sleep. On Monday, I turned in my schoolwork, every assignment signed as Gwen. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even mentioned it. I simply went about my day, being the best girl I could be. Valerie, Zoe, and Amelia demanded details about my date, but I kept things simple. I had a good time. That was all I said. I didn't mention the kiss. Somehow, it felt too private. Word got around that Norm and I had gone out, but no one treated it like a scandal. If anything, it was accepted without much fuss, except for one glaring change. Norm started walking me to all my classes. Everyone noticed. He never made a big deal out of it, but his presence at my side became constant, unspoken proof that he and I were a couple. Sort of. Time flew by after that. Soon, it was only a few weeks before the pageant. That's when Mom sat me down with a familiar smile. "Gwen, I think it's time you and I went shopping for a gown." I had no idea what went into selecting a gown, but Mom did. And since she was the one paying, I let her take the lead. The first thing she insisted I needed was a corselet. I had never even heard of one before, but I learned fast when Mom plucked one off the rack and led me into the changing room. At first glance, it looked sexy as hell. That is, until Mom started tightening the laces. Then it became something closer to medieval torture. But when she finally declared it tight enough, and I turned to face the mirror, my normally 26-inch waist was now a sleek 24 inches. My breasts, helped along by the built-in cups, were pushed up and out, filling the bodice perfectly. The white satin gleamed under the dressing room lights. "That'll do just fine," Mom said, satisfied. I started to take it off, but she pulled the tags off instead. "Keep it on." We added a pair of white satin high-cut panties to match before leaving the store. Then came the dress. It wasn't just a prom gown, it was a bridal dress. Off the shoulder, white satin brocade with Irish lace inserts and a small train. The moment I put it on, I felt something shift inside me. I had worn skirts and dresses for weeks now, but nothing made me feel more feminine than that gown. I didn't want to take it off. We found shoes to match, along with a handbag, pearl earrings set in gold, and then Mom decided to expand my wardrobe: further jeans, blouses, more skirts, and 2 extra dresses. By the time we got home, I was already itching to wear the dress again. Mom didn't object. She even used the opportunity to make some small alterations, pinning and marking the fabric as I stood in front of the mirror. I still wore the corselet, by now growing used to its snug grip, but loving the shape it gave me. After Mom finished, we stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Something passed between us, something unspoken but undeniable. Then, without a word, she left the room. I quickly changed into jeans and a top and headed out. I needed to talk to someone, and Zoe's house was the closest. We sat together on her porch swing, and I described my new dress in vivid detail. Then, casually, she dropped a bombshell. "So, I heard they're adding a big dance to the gala on the night the maiden is selected." She gave me a sideways glance. "Are you gonna ask Norm to be your escort?" I hesitated, but only for a second. I guess I probably will. He's the only guy who's really shown any interest in me. Zoe broke into a huge smile. "That's good, because he's got the hots for you, big time, Gwen. And everybody knows it." I nearly choked. "We've been out exactly once. How can he have the hots for me?" Zoe rolled her eyes. "Gwen, come on. Everyone knows this is for the maiden's pageant, yeah. But nobody sees you as a boy anymore. You don't just play a girl, you are one. You look, act, talk everything just like the rest of us. And let's be real. No one thinks you're going back to being a boy when the pageant's over. And going out with Norm. That just sealed the deal." I sat there, her words washing over me. She was right. I had no intention of going back. I had just needed to hear it from someone else. I asked Norm to escort me to the pageant, and he asked me out again. Meanwhile, Kathy, the only other contestant who had really committed, had been improving rapidly. Her posture, her walk, even her voice, it had all softened. She had a small group of guys around her at all times now. At first, I didn't care much about winning. The pageant had only been an excuse, a way to be a girl in public. But as the days inched closer, something inside me shifted. I wanted to win. Not for the trophy, not for the title, but because winning would prove it. Winning would confirm my ability to be a girl, and more than that, it would give me a reason to stay one. The Maiden of the Year had to make appearances throughout the next 12 months. That meant, if I won. As the pageant loomed closer and closer, I became edgy, unsure. But then Norm took me out again. And when he kissed me that second time, I felt at ease again. I had no idea that Mom had made arrangements for me at her beauty shop. On the morning of the pageant, instead of heading straight into preparations at home, I found myself once again in the stylist's chair. It wasn't just a quick touch-up, it was a full transformation. For nearly 4 hours, they worked on me. Almost every inch of my skin was waxed, stripping away any trace of unwanted hair. My nails were done, this time with acrylic extensions that made my hands look impossibly elegant. My hair was set and restyled, with more color added for depth and shine. And when the professional makeup artist worked her magic, I hardly recognized myself. When I finally looked in the mirror, I was in awe. I had never looked so stunning, so completely feminine. I turned to the team, eyes shining, and whispered, "Thank you." Mom helped me get dressed, layer by layer, piece by piece, until I was no longer a boy playing dress-up. I was simply Gwen. We started with the white satin panties, the smooth fabric sliding over my skin like a whispered secret. Then came the corselet, once again working its magic, cinching my waist, lifting my chest, sculpting me into the perfect silhouette. This time, Mom introduced something new. "These are for the garter belt," she said, handing me a pair of white nylons. As I fastened them in place, I felt myself sinking deeper into my femininity than I ever had before. The feeling was intoxicating. Finally, Mom slipped the dress over my head, zipped it up, and I stepped into my matching heels. I turned toward the mirror. My transformation was complete. Only the final touches remained: jewelry, perfume, the smallest of details. But in every way that mattered, I had arrived. Norman and his dad arrived shortly after Mom had changed. We took pictures in the living room, a blur of smiles and flashing cameras. Then we were off, headed toward the grand hall. Inside, I saw 40 other contestants from schools across the county. Some were breathtakingly beautiful, others less so, but each had committed, just as I had, to stepping into this world. I took my contestant number, nerves bubbling inside me, and eventually, it was my turn to walk across the stage. The bright lights hit me, the sea of faces blurred beyond the glow. I walked the promenade, turning this way and that, my smile unwavering. Then came the questions. "State your name, your school, and a little bit about yourself," the MC said. I lifted my chin, voice steady. "I'm Gwen. I attend." And just like that, I sealed it. By the time the last contestant finished, the judges gathered for a short deliberation. Then, the MC returned to center stage. He began calling names. 7 winners total, a queen and her 6-member court. One by one, the names were read. The court was filled. I wasn't among them. For a moment, my stomach dropped. Then I heard my name. I wasn't the queen, but I was her second in line. If the queen couldn't fulfill her duties, I would take her place. The girl who won Dorothy was tall, with long brunette hair, a body to die for, and a brilliant smile. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. The pageant exploded into the usual fanfare: tears, laughter, crowns, and flowers. But I had won more than a title. I had won myself. And that was enough. Later, at a meeting of the winners, Dorothy pulled me aside. "I just thought you should know," she said softly. "I'm never going back to being a boy. Ever." I stared at her, realization washing over me. "Me neither," I whispered back. We shared a quiet understanding. We hadn't just entered a pageant. We had found ourselves. Norman led me back to our table, then took my hand and guided me onto the dance floor. His arms wrapped around me, holding me close as we swayed to the music. He looked down at me, his smile warm and steady. Across the room, I saw Mom dancing with Norm's dad. They were smiling, completely at ease, ignoring us. Norman's hand tightened slightly around mine. "Come with me." He led me onto the outdoor walkway overlooking the river. The air was cool, the lights shimmering against the water. And then he pulled me into his arms. This kiss was different. It wasn't soft or hesitant, it was hungry, deep, consuming. His tongue teased against mine, insistent and urgent. By the time we pulled apart, I was breathless. And then he opened his hand. He pressed it into my palm, warm from his skin. I held it, my fingers curling around it. I didn't need to say anything. I just nodded. And in that moment, I knew this was who I was meant to be. It had been nearly 4 months since the pageant, and I had settled into my life as Gwen completely. School continued as if nothing had changed because, in everyone's eyes, nothing had. There were no whispers, no sideways glances, no lingering questions. I simply was. Mom and I had fully fallen into a mother-daughter routine, something so natural it was hard to believe we had ever been anything else. She no longer made comments about what I wore or how I presented myself. Instead, she helped me pick out outfits, gave me tips on my hair, and let me raid her jewelry box whenever I wanted. I loved every second of it. And Norman? He had been with me every step of the way. A few nights ago, Norman and I had played a game of explore. Some might have called it groping, but for me, it was something much deeper. It was a journey, an intimate, uncharted step into my femininity that I had never dared to take before. And God, did Norman make it worth it. His touch ignited something inside me that had been waiting, longing to be set free. He didn't just hold me, he worshipped me. Every touch, every whisper against my skin made it clearer than ever. I was a girl, and I never wanted to be anything else. That night, as I lay in bed, my lips still tingling from his kisses, I realized something undeniable. There was no turning back, no second guessing, no hesitation. The final nail had been placed. I had been reborn, and I was never going back. One afternoon, just as I was finishing my homework, Mom walked into my room, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "You might want to get dressed up, sweetheart." I looked at her, confused. "Why? What's going on?" "You'll see." She left me hanging with no answers. Curious but excited, I put on a soft lavender dress that hugged my waist just right, paired with delicate white heels. My hair cascaded in loose curls over my shoulders, and with a touch of lip gloss and blush, I was ready. I headed downstairs and froze. Norman was standing in the living room, looking nervous but determined. His hands were behind his back, his eyes locked onto mine as I descended the stairs. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart racing. He swallowed hard, then pulled something out. Not just any ring. A delicate gold band, set with a small, shimmering sapphire. I gasped. "Gwen," Norman said, his voice thick with emotion. "These past few months have been the best of my life, and I know we're young, and I know there's still so much ahead of us. But I also know that I don't want a future where you're not in it." Tears pricked my eyes. "I don't need an answer right now," he continued, taking my hand. "This isn't a promise to get married tomorrow. It's a promise that I see you, that I love you, and that no matter what happens, I want to stand beside you." My breath hitched. I glanced over at Mom, who stood by the doorway, smiling not in surprise, but in approval. She had known. She had always known. I looked back at Norman, my hands trembling as I reached out to take the ring. The moment it slipped onto my finger, I knew I belonged here. Not as a boy who had once been confused, not as a contestant in a pageant, not as a passing fantasy, but as Gwen. Forever. I threw my arms around Norman, pressing my lips against his, feeling the future settle around me like a second skin. I was home. I was loved. I was me. And I was never looking back.